I didn't know how to do cosmetic booking. She wasn't that good at it. We were booking maybe 30% convert. We were converting 30% of people to surgery. I put her in the converting club with Catherine. For 6 months, we went from 30% to 90% conversions. It was awesome.
Hello and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Ramsen Azizi. I love his name. He's a Chicago-raised, board-certified plastic surgeon who founded his own private practice named RAM Plastic Surgery, and that's also in Chicago, and he's had it for 9 years now. So here's a fun fact. Before medicine, Dr. Azizi spent 25 years as a music producer and performer, so we'll talk more about that. He then completed general surgery training in Chicago, followed by a plastic surgery fellowship at the Long Island Plastic Surgical Group, where he trained with more than 40 leaders in the field and where he mastered body contouring techniques, including BBLs, mommy makeovers, lipo, and fat grafting. He has performed over 4,000 sculpting procedures and added RAM Wellness Center recently, and it's a cutting-edge recovery sanctuary offering biohacking, lymphatic therapies, red light, and hyperbaric oxygen treatments, and science-driven solutions to help patients heal faster and maintain their results longer. So Dr. Azizi, welcome to Beauty and the Biz. I am so glad I finally got you on.
Thanks so much, Catherine. It's a long time coming. I'm excited to be here.
Right? So we just have to talk about the music part. How did you jump from 25 years of music producing and performing to then I'm going to be a plastic surgeon? How does that happen?
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of it was in parallel. So I started doing music when I was like 3 years old, piano, guitar, drums, taught myself drums, did a lot of this, was in bands during high school, and got into producing electronic music when I was in high school. This is kind of like the mid 90s. And I was really big into music. I went to undergrad. I was pre-med. I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. I go to med school. I'm trying to figure out what kind of surgery I want to do. And I'm doing all the different rotations. And what really clicked for me was, so I was doing a lot of producing. I was playing raves. I was doing producing for hip hop beats for Chicago rappers and stuff. And I'm going to med school. And what was interesting was when I did my rotations in plastic surgery, as I'm trying to figure out what kind of surgery I want to do, when we would do these little local flaps, little local rotational flaps, it felt very similar to the same outside the box type thinking that you do when you're producing a song. So when I would sit at like my studio and you'd have all your like tools and you have this idea of what you want to do and you're trying to think from point A to B and how to do that, it felt very similar creatively to the little local flaps and the outside the box thinking and problem solving that we were doing in plastic surgery. So I was like, man, something about that clicked. I continued to actually play DJ and had residencies in Chicago clubs during my general surgery residency. So I would play on a Thursday night and then like be in surgery Friday morning, or kind of burning the candle at both ends. But it was a lot of fun. I love music. But eventually, once I went and did my plastic surgery fellowship and then I came back to Chicago and I started my practice, there's only time enough for one focus. And so I was able to do kind of both of these things throughout and just basically never slept. But, when you start your own practice and everything, it's you have to be so responsible to your practice. And, when you're in residency and fellowship and you're doing 80 hours, 100 hours a week, you're always just a zombie and you're tired. So if you're doing music on the side, like it's fine. You're no more or no less of a zombie. It's fine. And here's the other interesting thing is when you're doing 80 to 100 hours a week of your residency, the leverage you have to grow by doing more time at work is not that much. So if you're doing 90 hours or 100 or 105, you don't make more, you don't go through residency quicker, you don't excel more, none of that, right? So you can potentially have other hobbies. However, when you come out and you're in private practice or you're doing things for yourself or you're trying to grow, every little bit of energy and time spent moving the chains forward leverages your growth so much more, either your practice, financially, whatever you're trying to do surgery-wise. So I think that, once I finished my plastic surgery fellowship, came back, started my practice, like, yes, you have less time because you started your practice and you feel responsibility towards it, but you're like, but if I spent all my time and energy doing this rather than kind of splitting it between two things, I could grow so much more now that I wouldn't be able to have grown in residency and fellowship because that opportunity is not there.
They say it all the time, the opportunity cost of splitting your time. Steve Jobs, what did he say? 90% of everything, all my ideas are a no. Like my answer is no because I focus. So true. Let's talk about your fellowship for a second because it was unusual. It's this huge practice. I don't know if anyone has heard of Long Island surgical practice, but it's got 40 doctors or something. Was it a good fellowship in the sense of learning the business and marketing side, or was it just good for surgery, or what did you get out of that?
It's interesting. It is an interesting place. So at that time when I went, it was 20. It's the largest group of private plastic surgeons in the nation. It was 20 plastic surgeons. I think there's more now. Through our rotations, we're exposed to like 40, 200 employees. It's a huge machine, right? And it was private practice. And I knew eventually I wanted to do private practice when I was done. So I was like, okay, this will be good. It's crazy busy. You do a ton of procedures. You don't sleep like at all. And you do. I remember our cosmetic or our aesthetic numbers were like 4 times the minimums of what ACGME required. So we were getting a lot of aesthetic numbers, So the cool thing was you do a lot of hand. I felt comfortable with hand and trauma call. I felt comfortable with aesthetic stuff. And you do get exposed to some of the business stuff. But to be honest, what's interesting is that even though it's such a big aesthetic place and it's private practice, I felt that coming out, I still only had barely the tip of the iceberg of knowledge. And I was like, well, I think I have more than my compatriots who are at the academic centers, and I've done way more aesthetic. So I feel comfortable going out. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You're like, I think I know what I'm doing. And I think I'm going to go on. I think I feel comfortable, definitely feel comfortable operating. You definitely have an idea of some business sense, but you have to learn so much more. Actually, that book that's sitting behind you, Your Aesthetic Practice, I was reading the first 6 months I popped out of school. I think I found you. I'm sorry, out of my fellowship. I found you. I found the book, and you were sending it out complimentary at that time. I was like, good, because I can't pay anything, and I'm going to read the heck out of this book. So I would just sit in bed and read this, and I learned so much more out of your book than I did out of the aesthetic fellowship, even though it was a big private practice place. So great for learning, great for training. I knew though that after those tough 3 years and after 5 years of gen surge and 3 years of plastics, I'm like, I'm done with training. I don't know if I'm ready for the real world, but I'm done. I'm like, I'm going to go out and I just got to figure it out, basically.
Then how did you pick your location? And should I rent? Should I buy? Like what was that part like?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little about the transition from fellowship and everything, because I think this is always really good for a lot of people. So I started my practice right away. So I was born and raised in Chicago, been in Chicago my whole life for all my training. I only did the only 3 years I was away was in New York for the plastic surgery training. So I come back to Chicago. The plan was always to come back, and essentially I wanted to get a salary job at a hospital, just kind of do basic work, get a few years, steady paycheck, collect for my boards, get a lay of the land, and then go private after a few years, right? But no one was hiring. I tried to interview here and there. No one was hiring anything, and or specialties or niches or whatever. And I was basically like, man, I'm gonna have to create that position if I want to go back to Chicago, where like my girlfriend at the time, now my wife was there, my whole friends, family, everything was there for me. I was like, I need to create that position. I need to figure this thing out. So I was like, well, I guess I got to move this whole schedule way up sooner, right? So I was like, well, okay, now, so what do I do? I was like, I would Google everything. So I had no business training. I knew nothing about business and stuff. And I was like, okay, I would Google, what do you need to start a private practice? And they were like, it said something about LLC. And then I would Google, what is an LLC? Like, this is the level at which I was at. I didn't even know what an LLC was. And so I'd have to like find that out. And every day I would just Google and try to learn and Google and try to learn and kind of like, how do you make a business plan? Now it's easier with ChatGPT. This is now 9 years ago. You just had Google, but that's fine. You're just kind of learning things on the internet. And I remember, so I need to take a loan out. I have no money. You're coming out of residency and fellowship. We got no money. Most people are in debt. And I remember calling banks. I went through 9 different banks that I would talk to basically try to pitch like me and to get any kind of a loan or line of credit or anything to start a practice. And it was always like the big banks, like your Chase, your Bank of America, all these guys, it was catch-22. They're like, oh, you're not making money? We only lend to people who make money. I'm like, yeah, but what happened to being a plastic surgeon, just having a dream? And like, I'm just going to work and start my practice. So no can do. So finally, I remember I was in like the parking lot before surgery in one of in New York and Long Island in one of like the little burbs, pitching my spiel to a banker and being like, just here's my deal, here's what I'm going to do, and this is how I want to do it. And he was like, okay, that sounds pretty good. It was the ninth bank, and they gave me the line of credit, and it was $100,000, I remember, and that was a ton of money to me at that time. It was like it was the most money like ever, So I was like, that's crazy, but I'm so happy I did it. So my whole thing was, okay, come back to Chicago. I would rent. I rented and kind of subleased. The first 6 months I was renting and subleasing too expensive, and that kind of sucked. I was in downtown, and then what really worked was this opportunity showed up where I subleased little office space from a gynecologist, who I had met when I was in my residency. And that was good because it's all women's practice. And so you get your referrals, like you get your little breast reductions, you get your little C-section scar revisions, and kind of a little bit of anything. And like anything will do, sometimes in your, reconstruction, that kind of thing. So my whole thing was like this: keep the overhead as low as possible. I had one person working for me, one girl working for me, answering phones or whatever. And I didn't even have full-time work for her. It was just part-time. And I felt so embarrassed because I couldn't even offer her like a full-time position. But I was like, keep your overhead as low as possible, try to rent it as low as possible as I could, and try to make a good business decision every single day. Take it one day at a time, treat my patients super good, try to do surgeries super good, and just take it one day at a time and just win today and then win tomorrow and just keep going and just try to survive. And I paid myself a resident salary. You hear that kind of thing all the time. I paid myself the little bit that I was doing as a resident. The funny part here is this: when you come out of residency and fellowship and you're a plastic surgeon, you come back to Chicago and everyone's like, oh, you're a big shot plastic surgeon now. And you get invited to weddings and they expect you to give the wedding gift that a plastic surgeon would, but you are like making less money than a resident and you're just like super poor at this point, but you're expected to give the big wedding gift. You're a big time plastic surgeon. You hang out with people, they want you to buy drinks. And I'm like, oh my God. So you're dealing with that pressure. However, slowly but surely, being at that gynecologist's office and just trying to treat patients good and just trying to do good work, I started to do a little bit more work. I found out in the first 6 months of being in Chicago that insurance really wasn't going to pay much. So this was kind of another big transition that, I thought I would do half insurance and half aesthetic work ultimately. And you start doing some insurance work and then nothing's really paying. And I think that this is different state by state. Every state's different, but at least in Chicago, I found out very quick that it was not going to work out being private practice and working with insurance. So I had to switch over to doing aesthetics as much as possible. But obviously that's difficult because no one's giving you aesthetic cases when you're fresh out, So that's a whole nother story I'm happy to go into about how to build that side up. But that's kind of was the first 6 months to 1 year, basically.
The smartest practices know a big part of their practice growth comes from retention, referrals, and repeat treatments, not just from new internet stranger leads. That's why I created the KISS Loyalty Club, a done-for-you system that keeps your patients returning, referring, reviewing, sharing you on social media, and completing surgery. Discover how KISS can grow your own practice revenues by visiting kissloyalty.com today. But then how did you end up in this gorgeous building that you're in now?
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So flash forward a year, I'm here in this practice. I remember my one girl that was working for me left to go somewhere else because they're going to pay her more because I couldn't pay her that much. And I was like, oh, I felt so bad. I felt like it was like the girlfriend was breaking up with me or something, like that feeling. They're like, someone better. And you're like, I understand, you got to go. So I found, I found a new person, Jenny, who you met, who was my office manager slash kind of everything at that time. She was awesome. And I remember when I interviewed her, this is a year in, and I remember telling her like, we're trying to do more aesthetic surgery and we do like once a month or twice a month. I remember thinking like, we're not even doing one case a month or twice a month, if that, for aesthetics. So number one, how did I grow aesthetics? First was like the BBL niche. So before we get to kind of like the building, I think this is important when you're coming out was I realized early on that any niche you have is good in business and in medicine, or in plastic surgery. If any niche you have, you got to be known for something. It's helpful to be known for something. Breast is super hard to be known for because it's hard to be so good at breast surgery that you are better than everybody else. And everybody's doing breast, right? So all plastic surgeons are doing breast, Tummy tuck's hard because a lot of guys are doing mommy makeovers. At that time, like 9 years ago, BBL was getting more popular. It was everyone knew what it was. It wasn't crazy like it is now. And but I looked around and I thought that the people in Chicago that were doing it, I thought were doing an average job. I thought I could do better. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to really just try to go for this. So what I would do is I tried to price it well. I spent a little bit of money on Real Self for marketing. So I was like $500 a month for marketing. I knew that like, okay, if I get one case out of 8 months, I'll pay for this bit. And $500 a month at that time was so much money to me. Like I was barely paying myself that much. Like that $500 I remember spending at that time was just like a ton of money to me. And so what happened is, I spent a little bit of money on Real Self. I would try to do, I got one case. I tried to do a good job, get the photos, put it on Instagram. Okay, then you get another case, and then slowly start to roll. And so this is rolling up. Few years doing this, it's getting busier. Going from one case to 5. I get 5 cosmetic surgeries in a month. I'm like, I think I'm on top of the world. This is huge. I'm just so excited, And so COVID comes around 2019, 2020, right? Practice is growing. It's doing well. I think we're going to have our like biggest April ever. And then like the world shut down that April and they didn't let us operate for like 6 weeks. in Chicago. And that was kind of like one of my, that was a big challenge. I wouldn't say my first big challenge was kind of going to practice and kind of dealing with all that stuff and all the other pivots you have to do. COVID 2020 hits. You're not allowed to operate for 6 weeks. I thought we were going to have our biggest month ever. I'm all freaked out. I have a few staff. It's not like you have tons of savings early on because you're early in practice. You're just always throwing your money back into the business. Like you don't have a ton of savings. You can't take a lot of money off the table. So what we did was we pivoted. We did some strategic stuff. We told people, okay, we can't operate now, but we're doing our virtual consults. We're getting our list together and y'all get ready because when they tell us we can operate, we're going to operate. They let us operate. We operate super busy. It's kind of nonstop. Like I think it was for a lot of plastic surgeons for a couple of years. And around that time, like after a few months of like, it's just nonstop and it doesn't look like it's stopping. I was like, I need to look into my own place because what I found in this, like I've been in practice now for 4 years by this point. I was like, look, every 3 to 6 months, some stupid thing would happen at a surgery center or a hospital or whatever. Some new nursing manager, some new OR manager, some new CEO. Everyone sucks. Everyone would come in, they would suck, they would add all this red tape, they'd change prices, you could get cases you couldn't, everything it'd be topsy-turvy. And so your OR situation every 6 months would always change, and that threatened your practice. And I felt like you were like a nomad, right? Like you're like, I'm just going to spend the next 20 years just trying to find somewhere to operate. And not only would that annoy me, but you'd have a lot of people who are not as educated as you and telling you how to run your practice basically by being like, you can't operate and threatening your livelihood. So I was like, I need to somehow figure out how to do this myself and bring it all in-house. I went and saw one person who was doing a lot of surgeries in one little office with like maybe 10 staff. And I thought, wow, you don't have to have this 200 employee thing like I had seen in New York. I didn't ever want to have my own place because I had seen this big machine in New York and I was like, I don't want any piece of this thing. I was like, oh, I'll just have a good relationship with the surgery center and we'll just kind of crank cases for 20, 30 years and that'll be it. But I was like, I need to take control of my destiny. I need to suck it up. I need to invest this money that's coming in from all this windfall of cases into our own thing. So then I had a little bit of interest in commercial real estate investing. I always thought that I was going to do a lot of that stuff. So it was a no-brainer that I was like, I'm going to buy the building when I do this. And so I started looking for my own space to then do a build out for like my own operating room and aesthetic center and stuff.
And you probably had a good choice there because after COVID, so much office space was available, right?
Yeah, we were kind of in the middle period where like there was still office space available. The loan, like the interest rates hadn't gone up yet. So it was still in like 2020 where it was still this run up where like economy was doing pretty good. It was kind of growing. Interest rates weren't bad. There was a lot of money pumped into the market. And so there was like some more money around and stuff. And so people were doing surgeries. And so what I would do, I remember, I think your last podcast I listened to last week, that person was saying that they were hanging out on LoopNet. So LoopNet, I didn't know about it, but LoopNet is for commercial real estate. It's basically like realtor.com, but commercial real estate. So here's what I would do. Because things were shut down in Chicago, I had a balcony in my apartment building. I would sit on my balcony because the weather was nice. I would drink a whiskey and get a buzz going. And then I would search LoopNet to kind of like look through my dreams. And this was kind of akin to like when you're trying to get that liquid courage to go talk to a girl at a club. That no one ever does anymore because no one does that, I guess, anymore. But when you're trying to get that liquid courage, it helps to kind of decrease your inhibitions, decrease your prefrontal cortex and your frontal lobe telling you can't do this. So I would catch a buzz and I would hang out on my balcony looking through LoopNet, looking for different like commercial buildings, be like, that's cool. I could do that. Well, maybe I'll do that. Or maybe do that. So I finally found a place that, here's the thing with commercial buildings or whatever. It's either you buy a place for $800,000 and you put $1 million into it, or you buy a place for 1.8 million and you put nothing into it. So it's like either you're doing the work or someone else is doing the work, but either way, you're going to pay for it, And that's another thing. I would recommend buying the building. Of course, everyone wants to buy the building, but I'm like, look, you're paying for that build out anyway. So right now, if my rent is $10,000 to myself, because my own realty company renting myself $10,000, that rent would have been $17,000, and I would have been paying for that build out regardless, or paying for that mortgage regardless. Like you're paying for it regardless because they're going to work it right into your loan. So you might as well own both things. You might as well own the building, rent it to yourself for a sweet rate, so that your own office can turn a higher profit margin. And then later, when you're trying to sell the building, you can always lease it back to yourself for a higher rate, and the building is worth more, that kind of thing. But at least you're not crushing yourself initially like someone else who would own that building would crush you. Obviously, this is going to be different everywhere because some places you can buy stuff for more, some places less, but you don't have to do a huge build out. So long story short, I knew that I wanted to have my own place. I could have my own destiny of my own OR because everyone else would constantly be messing around with your schedule. Number two, I'm a boutique practice and I want it to be high end. And like, when I'm subleasing from a gynecologist and having a gynecologist office, it doesn't look high end like a boutique plastic surgery place that, you can't compete with Beverly Hills like that. You can't compete with the nicest places. So I knew that for the next chapter of my practice, if I wanted to be high end, I wanted to have like some higher prices and really take care of people at a high level. I needed to have a place that looked like that too, that looked good. It was modern looks, all that blue and gold and marble stuff that you need to make it look good. You got to smell good. You got to have cold pressed juices, all this kind of stuff, so that it feels luxe. So it feels like that Four Seasons, Ritz Carlton feel, and it's high touch. So then I was like,
talk about that for a second. How did you make that happen? You have to know an architect or an interior designer, or how did you do the build out, and what were the pros and cons of that?
So touring these buildings, I found this space, and the space I have is 6,000 square feet, and it was kind of one big empty space. It was totally dilapidated. We had to redo all the wiring, new roof, new front facade, like everything. So it was a total regut. So I got the building cheaper, but then I paid way more for the build out than I did for the building. Also interesting, I had 4 one-bedroom apartments upstairs that I remodeled, and I turned those into a recovery house that worked really good during COVID. Yeah, I had that for about a year and a half. We don't have that anymore, but that was actually really cool because it was the only of its kind in the Midwest, I think, where the clinic is there, the surgery's there. You go upstairs for the recovery house. You come down for massages. Like, it was all in house. So no big deal. But the original plan was always like, well, we have those apartments. We could always just rent those out, and they'll pay for the mortgage. Also, the other cool thing is when you have a full commercial space, you pay like twice as much in taxes as you do as you have a mixed space. So if you have a mixed residential and a commercial space, your taxes are half as much. So even if having those apartments upstairs that I basically didn't pay any extra for and never renting them out, you would save thousands of dollars every month simply by having some apartments upstairs that now made it into a mixed residential commercial place. And I know that rule applies in a lot of different states in the US. So that's something worth looking into, right? So, yeah. So anyway, having gone to so many different surgery centers and practiced in so many different operating rooms, number one, I was like, let me fix all the problems I saw at the other places as far as flow and that kind of stuff. And so I had an idea of what I wanted the place to look like. But here's the thing. There's all sorts of different construction companies that make these kinds of places. And you have people that specialize in, say, dental practices and medical practices, but they don't know how to build like a quad ASF OR. You have places that you have people that work in the hospitals, but they work with these huge budgets and these kind of bland things. They don't know how to make like a private practice plastic surgery place that looks slick, right? So you kind of got to look kind of halfway in between. So you got to find a person that can make it look slick. They work with dental practices and they do things on a smaller scale, but they can build an operating room for you that works as well, So that's hard to kind of find those niche people. And perhaps there's no good, perfect thing. I mean, our situation wasn't perfect, but they were able to build it for us. I think if you go to some of the conferences, you talk to some of the consultants, I think the consultants will either know a surgeon that could put you in with some of these people or something like that. So I thought it was
a great organization. The Cohan Group, they were on the podcast. So, and they're awesome. That's their niche. They do medical, but they know how to get the thing certified,
Yes. And you got to, it helps to come in and have a ton of vision for it. And then they help you to when you're asking them, you're like, is this big enough in OR? Does this look big? Small? Is this enough? Are these hallways fine? The ADA, disability type stuff and permitting and that kind of stuff. They know how to do it. For example, here we had signage on the building, and it takes a long time to get signage approved, but they knew a signage guy who knows like the alderman or something. So things kind of move quickly.
You have to know people for sure.
Yeah, and it takes time. It's always it costs more and it takes longer than you expect. Even though these guys were known for being on time and on budget, they weren't. So I can't imagine anyone who doesn't have that reputation. But yeah, it took. I'll tell you. And people are always like, "Oh my God, I was paying for this place while I was working at the other place." It's like, yeah, that's how it goes. You pay for rent at one place, and you pay for 9 months of mortgage at the other place if you're lucky, or 1 year. That's just how it goes. So you have to be responsible. You have to have this. So here's the other thing. You got to have this runway of patients. You better have a ton of patients and a ton of surgeries going, and you kind of run the numbers. You kind of run it conservatively, knowing that you can afford all that runway of paying both places. Okay. Have enough patients that you can pay the overhead of having a more expensive, bigger place, and I ran the numbers. I knew at that point I was spending I think around $50,000 a month or $40,000 a month on OR and anesthesia fees at the hospital. So I was like, okay, rent is this much. My construction loan is this much. This is how much my mortgage is. This is how much I think overhead's going to be. I'm going to run the numbers rough. And I was like, I think it'll be 50. Maybe it'll be I think, but I can make more money doing this because you have more time at the office, right? And then you run the numbers and you're conservative. And part of me was like, look, even if I run the numbers wrong and I lose a little bit of money, but I have control of my own destiny and I don't have to deal with all the hospital bureaucratic red tape and someone coming in every 6 months telling me when I can operate and not. Even if I lose a little bit of money, then fine. But the interesting that happens is that people always talk about the efficiency and you don't have to drive to the hospital and go to your office and this and that. But some of the interesting things open up. Like prior to opening my place, and I'd operate at the hospital, I thought I was a BBL guy because 80% of my cases were these 4-hour BBLs that I would do. And like 20% of my cases were these bigger mommy makeover cases that were bigger cases, combo cases. I thought, I'm like, I'm not a combo guy, I'm a BBL guy. Yeah. Turns out, as soon as I rolled into my own place and we had the flexibility of the schedule, all of a sudden that thing flipped and 80% of my schedule became combo cases. I guess there was this inherent latent kind of desire from my patients to do these combo cases. And I became a 20% BBL guy. And that actually helped business because really the combo cases obviously make more money. They have more margin. It's basically like having 2 cases, but without the turnover of the room, you know? And so these interesting things open up kind of when you go into your own place and you're able to kind of control things. And then people love seeing that you have your own place, you have the control, they already feel comfortable as patients. They feel comfortable with it. It feels more boutique. So I came in with the vision of being boutique and kind of all these things. And I remember I even had specifics. I was like, I got to have cold pressed juices and they got to be tasting good and they got to taste fresh. So you have all these little ideas, you know, but yeah, that was kind of all that.
Through all that journey, what was the biggest mistake made that you learned from that others could also learn from?
Lots of mistakes for sure. I'd say the biggest learning lesson that people told me before, but it's totally true, is you have to be all hands on. You have to keep a super close eye on the contractor and your building and always keep an eye on everything because you're going to catch mistakes that they won't. And here's the thing, no one's going to care more about your place than you. If that plug is turned 90 degrees the wrong way, you don't like it, or if that thing doesn't look like it's going to fit through that room or something like that, or hey, we talked about this, but this isn't like this, or like the floor is a little not level and you're like, this ain't going to work. And they're like, no, that's fine. We already talked about that. The OR is not going to get a certain temperature. No one's going to care more about your thing than you. So you can never be too close or you cannot hand that thing off. You have to be all hands on deck. And this is, we spent about 30 hours in doing design sessions and designing everything down to the color of the electrical plugs on everything with this construction group. But even then, I still had to be all hands on deck with it. That was the biggest, I guess, learning lesson that I knew. And the other thing is this, look, it costs a lot. Your overhead goes up a lot. You can definitely do more cases and there's more upside, but it's more risk. It's like you're going from limit poker to no limit poker, you know? And it's like already jumping into private practices like that. The next big chapter is having your own place. So the swings are bigger, which means that like your good months are good, but like your slow months are more scary. And you have to really get that kind of strong mindset. And I think the whole private practice thing is just being a surgeon, you have to have a certain strong mindset. Being a private practice surgeon, you have to have like a crazy strong mindset. It's like, if everyone remembers that movie Rounders, they talk about it. They say, yeah, it's a poker movie with Matt Damon from the 90s or 2000s that like anyone who was into poker back then can quote the whole thing. And anyway, there's a line in it that says that many pros don't even play no limit poker because they can't handle it. I feel that a lot of private practice plastic surgery is that it's like the swings are high and you can do better and you can make more, you can create big cool places, you can make kind of bigger impacts, but the swings are hard and like the lows are harder. So if you hit hard times, you really got to figure out how to pivot and get through it and have backup plans. And those backup plans are stuff like you better have that line of credit ready to go when the summer months hit and things are slower. Or you're doing a build out, you better have more money on deck than you think you will, or staff issues. Everything's always gonna, you can't plan everything in life. Nothing's ever perfect. And it's right when you need that staff member who's a killer and they leave at the time that you need them to be a killer. And you just, it's like there's this meme that says like a man who had lost all hope loses last bit of hope that he didn't even know he had. Last shred of hope. It's like just when you think you're down, you're even more down. However, when you're up, you're even more up. So it's just, I think you just learn how to handle these things better. And I think the whole mindset thing is a big deal for private practice.
Well, there's a saying, life is 50-50. And until you understand that, you're going to keep getting beat up by it. And it's so true. Enjoy the good times, but then, expect the bad times and cover your butt, have some expenses that are covered for, at least have some giveaway money or giveaway money. So you're not frantically panicked when things go sideways, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think always having that plan B. I mean, I always kept that line of credit open since when I first started my practice, and having someone like that is good. Um, a really good book on this, Stoicism philosophy, Stoicism thought is very good for this. A
Yeah.
really good book that I love by Ryan Holiday is The Obstacle is the Way. So if anyone who's a surgeon who's just having a hard time or like just hard time at life, the book is so good to give you perspective. And there's another saying I heard that says, choose your regrets in life. So my regret would have been being at the hospital, dealing with that administrative staff, never kind of doing my own thing, and never having all this kind of cool stuff and being able to do all this stuff. And here's the crazy part: I didn't want to have my own place, but somehow through just hard work and taking it one day at a time, I think I started my practice at 35, and at 39, I made that call to a construction company in the building and everything to buy the building and all that. And I was just kind of like, I was like, I didn't think I'd have to I didn't think I'd be buying my own place and building it even for 15 years. And somehow you happen upon that within only 5 years, just through like crazy hard work. And then I was like, well, if I did this in 5 years, what else can I do in the next 20 years? So it kind of like that level of motivation and drive and hustle and grind begot more of it. And so that's why I wanted to actually like, well, if I did this in 5 years, what more can I do? And what more can I do? And what more can I do? So it's kind of like you hustle and grind, you do more, and then you get more energy and drive to do more because you're like, well, what more can I do? And of course, it's different for everybody. Some people have kids and they want to focus on their kids, and I don't have kids now, and I have them soon, and maybe I'll slow down when I have kids. Who knows? We'll see.
Wow, you did do a lot in 4 years. Congratulations. But when you have your own place, all of a sudden now you do need to step up and you need to be a manager and a leader and a visionary and the marketing guy and blah, blah, blah. Like you get it all. You wanted autonomy. Here you go.
That's
Here's
right.
autonomy.
It's all on you.
It really is, and you're completely responsible no matter what. No matter what you can blame it on the staff if you want, but all arrows lead to you. So
Yeah.
when it came time to hire staff, one of the best things you did was you kept it boutique-ish, and you didn't overhire and you didn't overpay on the hire. So talk about staff for a second. How do you hire and how do you fire, and then how do you motivate these people to show up every day with a smile?
Yeah, all three of those things are three different topics. So how do you hire? Okay, so tactically speaking, we always found people on Indeed. So like Indeed works good. I know a lot of people are like, ask your friends, this and that. I guess I never had a big hospital doctor network, so I never really had people to ask. So we always found people on Indeed, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to hire for attitude, skills you can teach. It helps if they have skills. It helps if they have experience. I actually really love finding anyone. You want people who have had hard things in the past. So anyone who's like been a server in the past, or anyone who worked service industry, or anyone who worked at front desk at a service industry and was there for a while, not just like 3 months in the summer, but like was a waiter or waitress for a long time. That's always good. I liked hiring people that came from other fields that I felt that they would be getting into this kind of more glamorous plastic surgery thing. Like if they were doing general surgery, wound care, if they were doing urology, like Foley's and this kind of stuff, and colostomy bags and stuff like that, that's not as fun. And so when you take that person who's got that kind of like level of grind and they're working at that, and they come to aesthetic plastic surgery, and now like the hardest day is like when you're talking about boobs and butts and this kind of stuff, and it's just the problems aren't as high amplitude. It's like you never have to, the worst news you usually have to tell someone is that the scar sucks, or like the fat didn't take as well. You don't have to tell someone that like their cancer didn't come back, right? So I think hiring people from general surgery, urology, family medicine who are looking for something different and kind of the aesthetic stuff, and just kind of really are interested in that, is really good. So I like having that. And I swear a lot, but like I'll listen. I love. Let's just pretend I'm talking to another plastic surgeon. I always say like I like to hire people that have eaten elsewhere. So if you've eaten being a waiter, if you've eaten some bad job, if you're like at like some med spa that you really want to do good and you want to be a part of a big team, and it's just the whole culture sucks and everyone sucks, it's really nice to do that. It's hard to hire people straight out fresh because they haven't eaten elsewhere really, and they don't appreciate things often. It's not impossible, but they don't have the perspective, and a lot of this is perspective. That's sad. That's what I would say for hiring.
One tip about the hiring, one of the questions I ask is, give me a challenge that you had either personally or professionally that you've grown from. And some people have been like tough childhoods, but
Yes.
that grind, like talk about eating eating it, like,
Yes.
they have, and they understand setbacks and that kind of thing, and resilience and that kind of thing. And then others have said, oh, I really wanted to be the prom queen, and I was beaten up by this other girl, and I just can't get over it. And I think, wow, okay, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So those kinds of little things, find out where these people came from,
Yeah, I agree. Resilience is probably the biggest thing. If you find someone that's got any kind of resilience in the background, like, or even like they're a marathon runner, that they can
Yeah, I love
dig
the
down deep.
competitive nature too.
Yeah, dig down deep and like do it. Because like when you're in private practice, you're often spread thin, because here's the thing. If you overhire, it's stupid because you're spending a ton of money. Everyone's sitting around staring at each other. I've always liked to keep people at about what I call 70% bandwidth. So it's like, you're working hard. You still have some bandwidth in case someone calls in sick, someone's not there, someone gets fired unexpectedly, or someone quits unexpectedly. And then when special projects come along, which you're always trying to do special projects because special projects help to get the team all together and stuff. And if you're trying to grow, you're always trying to do new things. 70% bandwidth can always grow to 100% bandwidth. If you keep everyone at 100% bandwidth, what happens is they're going to be at 110% when someone's gone, and then they start to burn out and no one wants to stay. So it doesn't matter how much you pay them or how, this and that. That's kind of what I try to shoot for. So here's the thing. I realized, man, it's so funny. When you come in, when you first start doing this, you're kind of like, well, I hired this person and they're here to make my job easier. But the thing is, you're like, I have 10 employees. But the thing is, you're the employee. You work for them. They don't work for you. You work for them, right? So you always stress about, is this person happy? Is this person paid well? Are they happy? Are they satisfied with their job? Am I teaching them enough? Am I motivating them enough? Is there enough growth potential? So I actually had to learn to be a better leader. And you can't do, this is a lifelong thing that I started to read a lot because I was like, I don't know how to do this stuff. And so I would try to read so much books like constantly and listen to podcasts and all this kind of stuff. And I actually had a couple recommendations I wrote down. So this is what I would do. The book Good to Great by Jim Collins, where they looked at, the top, Fortune 500 companies that stayed great for many years. That's killer. The book Traction, which is really, it's kind of dry, but it's so good about like systems and all that kind of stuff. It just makes you professional in the way you run your practice. I love Andy who's a really good leader. He is the CEO of First Form Energy. He's got a podcast where they do a lot of like political talk, but they also every Monday they do Real AF is what it's called. And it's a lot of business leadership, that kind of stuff. Amazing. Like it's really good business and leadership stuff. I love Alex Hormozi and his wife, Layla Hormozi. That's right. Layla Hormozi does a lot of like leadership stuff. Alex Hormozi does a lot of that marketing type stuff too. Super good. David Goggins, when it comes to just being just a super bad. So I just started to try to learn so much about leadership and motivating people. And here's the thing. One thing I heard from Ed Milet, who's a big motivational person and a huge leader, he said that, and many people have heard this, but you have to paint a dream big enough that everyone sees their dreams within it, right? So if you're trying to just kind of grind out a practice and you're not trying to grow, it's hard for people to come and see themselves growing within it. But if you're trying to grow to big things, and no right or wrong, it's just kind of what are you trying to do? If you are trying to grow and there's always new projects and you're always doing new things, there's a new service or there's new this or there's new that every 6 months or 1 year, then you can keep people who feel part of something that is growing, because what I'm always trying to do is recruit top 10% people, A+ people, because A+ people, top 10% people are trying to play with other A+ people. This whole thing, I always say this whole thing is a group project. We're all trying to do a group project. We're all trying to get an A. And it sucks when you're working with someone who's, you're doing I remember being a biology major and you work with someone who's a music major who's just going to do music. They just happen to be in this pre-med class and they didn't care, and you have to carry them, and it sucked. And it sucks being a group project with people you have to carry. So when you get a bunch of A+ people together, they work really super good as a team. And that's what you're trying to do. You get your top 10% people. Now, it also means that you probably have to pay more. It means that you're looking for more hustle and grind, but it also means you have to stimulate these people more to make sure that they have growth, they have new opportunities, and that you're growing as a leader and as a practice so that they can continue to do more things within it. And everyone's different. I think you have to understand you got to like learn everybody's goals. And so I always try to ask people like, well, what would make you happy? What are you looking for in the interview? And I try to remember that. And for some people, it's like they're trying to do a certain skill, become a nurse. Some people are trying to like do this vacation. Like one of my MAs always wanted to go to Paris for the longest time, So like I try to remember these things, and you try to connect the dots. What's important is, and I learned this from Andy Frisella, is that you're trying to connect the dots for your staff on their day-to-day behavior and how that connects to what their goal would be. So for example, if your front desk receptionist is answering phones, and it's kind of like the doldrums, and you're like, how is this important? It's like so first of all, you tell her, you play a huge part in all these people's lives. We've been thinking about this surgery for 10, 20 years. They've been thinking about the surgery forever. And they're so happy to call you, and you are able to get them in and that kind of thing. You book these consults. You do such great customer service. People want to come back, and they come and they pay for surgeries, and all these surgeries pay for all the staff here, and everybody here gets to get paid based on how good you are. And then everyone here gets to go and fulfill their dreams and like buy their own like cars, take care of their family because you're so good at picking up phones. And that kind of thing makes sense for coordinators. That kind of thing makes sense for MAs and how they treat patients. It's actually true. You're not BSing anyone, but you're trying to connect the dots on everyone's day-to-day stuff and how that helps everybody and how it helps everybody's dreams to grow. Sometimes those dreams are financial. Sometimes those dreams are like, I want to go to this conference. And so you're like, well, when we have a huge month, we have a whole bunch of money and we can pay for people to go to conferences. And we can't do that if we don't. And because of that, it's kind of this thing where like you're trying to wrangle a bunch of tigers, right? So like if you're trying to get A+ people, these are all tigers and these are wild animals. And you have to be like Mike Tyson in the 90s. And you're like, it ain't easy to have a bunch of wild animals, but this is like basically you're trying to wrangle all these animals, and tigers are killers, and tigers getting all together are going to kill. You can't have a bunch of llamas and try to take over the world and try to grow with a bunch of llamas. Like you need to have tigers, but it's also hard to handle tigers. So it's kind of like you just have to understand, what do the tigers like? Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's motivating, what's their love language, so to speak, and then try to connect the dots on what their day-to-day is and how does that contribute to what their ultimate goals are. And to be honest with you, I'm still learning. I feel like I've just cracked it a little bit, but there's so much to know.
Lifelong, as long as you own a business, that's a challenge forever and ever and ever, because just when you think you figured out human beings, there's no way you have. Human beings haven't even figured out themselves, let alone you out. So it's the biggest challenge you have. So you have this gorgeous building, which I absolutely love. But now we have to talk about the marketing, because you need a bunch of patients going through there, or at least a bunch of the right patients. How competitive is it in your area?
I remember hearing a stat a long time ago that Chicago was the fourth most competitive city in the nation. Like number one, I think, was New York. Number two was LA. Three was Miami, and four was Chicago. I would say that it doesn't feel like the fourth most competitive in the nation. I think it's small world, but it's also like, yes, there's aesthetic guys, but maybe there's like 30 of them. And so it's not crazy. But I would say you have to still do a good job, because to keep a full schedule of a lot of people coming in, you have to, I think, really work super hard at everything. So I would say it's quite competitive. I think LA and New York would probably be harder. And I think Miami's a different thing, because Miami's kind of a low price competition type thing. So it's different,
It's its own animal. It's a very unusual place. Regarding differentiating yourself, one thing you have done very recently was added that wellness center. And I say to surgeons all the time now, you're already a great surgeon. What else can you do to differentiate yourself? A better patient experience is a big one. Less downtime. If you can figure out how to or reduce this downtime, that's what we learned with COVID. What was one of the biggest issues? It was helping that everyone had money all of a sudden, but it was also they finally had an opportunity for downtime. So I said, let's start looking at that. How can you get these people up and back out and active before your competitor can? Can you talk about that? Was that what have you addressed that?
So this started years ago. I mean, I've had my own center. I've been, like I said, 9 years in practice. I have my own center for about 3-4 years now. But even before I had my own center, I was always trying to think, like, how can we problem solve? What's the scariest part? Recovery. How can we make recovery better? And if you use the thought experiment of like, can we make a big mommy makeover recovery happen in one day? How can we make a 1-day recovery? You'll never make a 1-day recovery because the body's got to recover. But if you start thinking about, well, what can we do to push it to 1 day? It's a good thought experiment to help you think outside the box, So the first thing we're like, well, what can I make things easier? So for example, we made like custom garments, and we would, bundle them in and include them in surgery. And then when I had my own place, I was like, we got our lymphatic massage person in-house, and then we bundle that into surgery, because I would show up in the morning of surgery, even though we'd always given lists to patients, been like, book your massage, book your massage. I show up and be like, did you book your massage? And then they'd always be like, no, I'll book it later today. I'm like, dude, you're going to be on the dark side of the moon later today with your brain. And there's the last thing you can be doing is like being on the phone booking massages. So I was like, if I can get the massage person in-house and I can include it in the surgery, and we schedule it for them, and there's no excuse. And then of course, then if they're getting their garments, and then they're getting their massages, and they're seeing everything's scheduled for them, they will have better results. They're going to be happier. They're going to be more taken care of. Now you have more boutique practice. And I kept trying to do more and more of that. So then the next thing was I went down to Colombia to see Alfredo Hoyos do his course, 4 years ago. This is during COVID. And I saw they were using hyperbaric chamber there for recovery. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do that because, the hyperbaric chamber I bought was like $60,000. And it's like, there's a lot of medical equipment that costs way more than there's stuff that costs less. But I was like, this will be a differentiator because if I get this chamber, very easy to use, then, and we include it in sessions. First of all, less than 1% of plastic surgeons are going to have their own hyperbaric chamber. So that's kind of a big deal. Potentially other people are going to want to use the chamber just as a service line item, And then when you include that in surgery, you're differentiating in a way that no one is, and it's hard to catch up. So once you start like adding these things, I was like, okay, the custom garments are in there, the massages are in there, the hyperbaric chamber is in there. And the thing is, the hyperbaric chamber has zero consumable costs. So once you buy it, that's like, you're done. That's it. You can just use it forever. And it's like, there's no consumable. So patients are like, wow, this really takes care of stuff. And, it's a hyperbaric chamber helps decrease chance of complications. And then whenever you have like a complication, like you have a lipoburn or like a wound issue, it helps you to heal so much quicker. And I'll tell you what's funny is for those few months that I was thinking about the chamber and I was waiting for it to get it and I'd have the occasional complication, I was like, oh man, I wish I had that chamber right now, So I just continued to be like, how can I solve problems for patients? The recovery house was an idea for that. And then what I learned from you and your book when I was lying in bed, first few months of practice, I had no patients, was when you bundle things in, they can't pick apart those line items and try to like unbundle things and ask for discounts. So we don't get the discount question thing because it's kind of like this. You come from our BBL or you come from my tummy tuck, you come from Mom Makeover, and this is the price. And then all these things are included. And all these things are things that people are going to be paying for anyway. And but if you have massage included, there's hyperbaric chamber and you have like, now we opened the IV bar this summer. And that didn't cost much to open an IV bar because you already have the space. And you get like some massage chairs, you get some nice little room, you get scents and this and that, and it costs almost nothing, but boom, you got an IV bar. And you include these in surgery and people feel better, they can sleep better afterwards, they feel rehydrated. And so they get an IV after surgery, like a week or within the first week after surgery. And then we got red light panels, right? Because red light panels help. I found that the sweet spot for that was around week 3 or 4 when people are getting the paresthesias and the fibrosis and the firmness from lipo and these surgeries are kind of feeling like tight and everything. And they get into the chamber, they get into red light around week 3, week 4, and the red lights have no consumable. And so now we started one thing at a time, just kept adding problem solving things to problem solve for patients and keep bundling. And then, you flash forward after a few years and you're kind of like, well, if my BBLs are really good and it's the same price as other guys around my area, and I bundle in, $2,500 worth of stuff that people would be buying anyway, that now they can like finance it. That's they go to one place, it's all booked for you, and they felt super taken care of. I think not only does that help to differentiate you because no one has that, and you can even do that now. It's like you can go do that across the nation. No one has a lot of these things all in one place. And then the other cool thing is that what pays for it? It's like you got patients that are always on the fence between you and another person. And they'll just choose you because they're on the fence, but this person got massage included and they got the custom garments and they got the hyperbaric and they got the IV and they really care. And you may get that one $25,000 surgery or another one. All you need is 2 people who are on the fence to bump over $50,000, $60,000. Boom, your hyperbaric chamber is paid for, And it's like you're differentiated in such a way that no one can keep up. And you just do this over the course of a couple of years. And yes, if you have a space, you can do more of this, but there's so many different ways of doing this. I even tried to think of like outside the box. I was like, well, I have a lot of patients come from out of town. What if I got a helicopter to go pick up patients, right? So I was trying to think outside the box. I even looked into like how much helicopters cost. Can I get a helicopter and send that over to Michigan to pick up patients? Is that worth it? Can I bundle that in? I was like, it's not as expensive as you think. Can you send? It's a $500,000, so it's $500,000 to get a helicopter, right? And but then M-Sculpt will sell you 2 machines for $500,000 that like will sit in the corner and collect dust. You know what I mean? But I was like, what kind of a crazy differentiator would it be to have a helicopter? Now I'm not saying I would do a helicopter, but when you're trying to think outside the box, you try to think, how can I be different and make things easier for patients? You scale that back, and then next thing you know, you're like, well, what if I have what if I had a driver on staff, and the driver just drives everyone around for the first week, and you get a chauffeur, or you get a free ride home within 90 miles after surgery. We send you back to Indianapolis, we send you back to Peoria, Illinois, or Wisconsin. Like you just get that drive back. So you think of something crazy, and then you scale it back to what works, and then boom, you got a differentiator that doesn't cost you that much. It's like maybe $150 for that drive, or $300 for that drive, for a $30,000, $25,000, or $10,000 surgery or whatever. And you're like, That's doable. And now you're like crazy differentiated because people are like, this is crazy. I even looked into like, could you have for mommy makeovers? Could we have a driver who picks kids up from school for the first 2 weeks? Every mommy makeover, your kids get picked up from school for the next 2 weeks. That's doable. From a logistical standpoint, it's doable. The tough thing is that you can do this in the 80s and 90s when anyone could pick up anyone from school. You can't do it in 2025 when not, no one's allowed to pick up anybody and it's got to be, you got to be fingerprinted or
I
whatever.
might be going a little too far, but I love the thought process. And frankly, you're psychologically attaching these patients to you because you're showing such great patient care that they will remember that emotionally. They will be tied to you forever with those memories. And that's going to completely help your word of mouth referrals as well as your reviews. It's just such a good idea when you think like a customer service driven practice.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really, that little bit can make all the difference in the world because 10 years from now, they'll say, oh, my girlfriend, I have a neighbor. Oh, my neighbor's saying she needs a mommy makeover. Who are they going to remember? Do you know how
Yeah.
many times you ask a patient who the doctor was and they don't remember who it was?
All the time. That's crazy. And I'm like, are they going to forget me too?
No, not with that kind of experience. I guarantee it. So we have to talk about the patient because the one thing you have done that's so different than so many others, you have decided who your niche market is, what type of patient that is, the demographics of them, and then what do they want. You are not everything to everybody, and you're killer at choosing the big gorillas. Like you don't grab every little scar revision. Then you're not like that. Give me your philosophy on the lead generation and then the lead process and what people go through to get to you.
Yeah. So just to go back on it, I niched down to the point where, so just to explain, I only work on women and I only do breast and body contouring. Okay. May not seem like a crazy niche, but because a lot of people do that. But the way that I got to this, 5, 6 years ago, I was, just like everybody else. When you come out, you do face, you do body. And at some point I realized I was like, the face patients I'm not enjoying them as much. It's hard to handle a rhinoplasty patient because that nose takes a year for the swelling to go down. And you can notice a millimeter or two of difference. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you got to revise it, that patient's with you for like 2 years minimum, So that's hard. And I noticed that I was charging kind of the same. My profit margin was the same for that and the body patients. So I was like, all right, niching down is good. I'm stopping doing face. I'm going to do body work. The patients have spoken. They like my body work. Maybe they don't like my face work as much. I'm going to go into body. Cool. Years, a year or two later, I think I was having some difficult male patients. And I was like, man, just the tough thing with male patients is that what I found was that they didn't want to follow the protocols. They didn't want to wear the garments. They don't want drains. They don't want to do the massages. They don't want to take any time off work. They don't want to take any time off working out. They want to go back, but they still want to have the killer results and they'll blame you when they don't follow the protocol and the results aren't there. So I didn't like that. And that drove me crazy because I was kind of like wearing the garment and drains is table stakes for plastic surgery. Like, we're not even having this conversation. You need the massages, you need this kind of stuff. And part of that was that, I'm trying to do high volume lipo, and I'm trying to do high definition. I'm trying to do like big surgeries that require all this recovery. If you're just trying to do like low volume lipo and a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and the results are just kind of average because you're not lipoing as much, then your recovery protocol can be average, and the men can follow that little average. Like, you wear a little bit of compression garment and your results are good, boom. However, these days, you have to compete at a high level because everyone is seeing, it's not like in the 90s where you could just be that local plastic surgeon that everyone just kind of goes to and they do a little bit of everything and your results are kind of average and above average, slightly plus. And everyone goes to you because that's it. You're now being compared across everyone on the internet. They're comparing, you could be the best BBL guy in Chicago and they're comparing you to the best BBL person in like Turkey for $3,000 and Mexico or whatever, right? So you're being compared across the nation. So you have to niche down because you have to be a super specialist. I remember even reading a book on plastic surgery from one of the Dr. 90210 guys. I can't remember his name right now, but I remember reading a book 15, 20 years ago. He was talking about you have to be a super specialist. And this was like 20 years ago, So even more so now, that was before social media. So eventually I was like, I'm not going to work on men and I'm only going to work on women. And so niche down to just doing basically tummy tuck, lipo, BBL, and breast work, right? And there's enough between these three things to keep you interested as a plastic surgeon, also enough to like, you can't excel if you do everything. It's very hard to excel if you do everything. And there's enough between breast and lipo, tummy tuck and butts to keep you busy and to excel and for people to know you at that. So I remember always thinking like, the people need to know you as a thing. And so first I came out and I tried to be that BBL person. And that eventually led to people coming for tummy tucks. They needed tummy tucks. They needed like breast work, and then became mom makeover stuff. So I niched down to the point where I'm doing this so that patients know that I only do one big case per day. So when you have your own center, you can do one big case per day. I like to do just one big case per day. So I tell them that when it's their day, they have all my focus and attention, and they love that for it's when their big day. People love that you specialize in that one thing. They want to go to that BBL person, that mom makeover person, that kind of thing. Now, your surgery skills have to be great. You still have to try to be the best. I'm not saying I'm the best. I try to be the best. We're all trying to be so good, but you have to work so hard at it. You have to be really good at surgery. You have to be really good with, listening to patients and meeting them at their level and connecting with them. Your office has to be really good. All these things have to be good. And then you layer all these things like you're layering in a soup, in a beef bourguignon. You're layering all these things together so that ultimately it becomes more than the sum of its parts, like a banh mi sandwich. It's more than the sum of its parts, And then people start to like you more and they come to you, and people love a super specialist. So I specialize in this. And then your next question is going to be like, our consult method and how people get in here and that kind of thing. Because this is a little bit unique. I didn't invent this, but the way we do it is like this. My thoughts were this. I'd be on social media, on Instagram. This is like, say, 4 or 5 years ago. I post my before and after photos. I would talk on social media. For the last 5 years, I've been doing like a 1 hour Q&A every other Friday on Instagram. And people love that. I get like a couple hundred people watch it, and the attrition is very low. Like 200-300 people tune in, and by the end of it, like 250 or 280 people have been watching like the whole thing. Like they watch the whole thing, right? So you're like, this is your core audience, right? What I liked about this was I was like, let me provide value. Online, educate, you got to provide value. You got to teach, you got to provide value. People want to ask questions. There's so much gray area and so much kind of BS with plastic surgery and a lot of craziness that it helps to have someone out there and everyone can do their own version of this, of educating in your own way. And you're providing value. People see you and they have confidence in you. They see a sense of authority, and they see your before and after photos, and hopefully they like them. And then I would collect a lot of reviews on Real Self. So you kind of like have to hit all these things. You got to have your reviews, you get your photos and all this. And trust me, I started with no reviews and no photos and no nothing and no blah, blah, blah. So you just got to do a little bit of all these things. So by this point, people want to consult because they've seen me online, they've seen my personality, they like it or don't like it. They've seen my before and after, so they like my aesthetic. My BBLs or my body work is different than surgeon A, B, and C. And it's like just like different flavors of ice cream. There's no right or wrong. It's just what kind of flavor do you like? Everyone creates a different type of thing, right? So they see the flavor of ice cream of result that I create. They see my personality and they either love it or hate it. Hopefully they love it. And then they see kind of like these things and they're like, I'm interested in a consult. This person I trust, right? So then when they go online, we developed this during COVID, when at some point we had so many consults, we were booked for so long that I was like, I need to create friction in the process. Because what would happen, we were booked for a year. What would happen is a person would wait a year for a consult and then they'd be a bad candidate. They'd have a bad body and unrealistic expectations. And you're like, I can't do this. It is so hard to tell someone who's been waiting for you for a year, you can't do their surgery. Like you'd have to do their surgery, just so hard. You can't let them down. So I was like, I can't have this where people are waiting a year or 6 months or whatever. I think the sweet spot is 3 to 6 months. I honestly think it's super hard to handle people a year out on your wait list. It's great for the ego, and it's great for financial planning, obviously. But like people's lives change, their weight changes, their goals change. All they have babies, don't have babies. It's so hard to handle people a year out. So I think that if you titrate your prices so that you're booked 3 to 6 months out, I think that's the sweet spot. So anyway, so at some point during COVID and things were crazy, I booked a year out. We actually paused consults just to hit the reset button. And then we developed this thing online where basically, if you want to consult, you go on our portal, you go online, and you submit everything. You submit your past medical history, your surgeries, your photos, your wishes, what you're looking for. And I have a little thing of like top 3 things that you're looking for. Write this all down. And your wish picks. And so people submit all this stuff. And I did this so that I could review these cases beforehand. And the idea was we would either classify people as a very good candidate or a possible good candidate or not a candidate, right? And this is all super transparently laid out on my website. Speaking of transparency, I have had my prices on my website for all my surgeries for a long time, like 6-7 years. And a lot of people don't recommend doing that. I think when you cost more, it's okay to do that because it gets rid of tire kickers. And once we put our prices out there, if you do if someone's looking for a $15,000 BBL or an $8,000 BBL, it's not the same person, So you get rid of the tire kickers that are not in the price bracket that people who don't appreciate the high value, high touch stuff that you do, The places that charge super low for a BBL, they'll do it. You'll never see a surgeon before or after. We see people all the time. We have all these things bundled in. And we're trying to super take care of people. So it's a different ball game, right? So anyway, people submit their consult. They have to go. It's a friction. There's friction in the process. They have to go in and write all these things down and submit it. And then what I do is, because I'm like, let me try to bring value.
They have to do their photos.
They got to do their photos because I'm trying to see if they're a good candidate or not. And so what I do is this. I write back for everyone. I write back possible good candidate or not or whatever, but usually it's possible good candidate. And I write down the plan that I would tell them. Tummy tuck lipo 360, BBL tummy tuck combo, breast lift with implants. And I'll even say silicone implants under the muscle, fold incision or vertical incision, or I'll say, and I'll write a little paragraph on their case. So basically they have a board certified high-end plastic surgeon review their case for free and write back what they would do for them. This person gets basically a consult for free from a high-end plastic surgeon, right? Not like my assistant or anything like that. And so I provide value. And here's how it helps. If that person was just looking for lipo and they need a tummy tuck, they're not coming in and wasting your time, and you're wasting their time being like, look, you need a tummy tuck. Your belly's hanging to your knees. But they're like, nah, I'm just looking for lipo. So you get them an answer quicker. And I did this so that people would not have to wait if I can't fulfill their dreams and I can't do their surgery and I'm not the right surgeon for them. They don't have to wait. For free, they get their case evaluated by a board certified plastic surgeon, writes down the tentative plan, and we write pricing. And a lot of our pricing is set. We don't really change things for revisions. If you get a BBL and it's a round 2 or round 3, everyone gets the same price. If it's a skinny BBL, a big girl BBL, everybody gets the same price. So it's very egalitarian, right? The price is the price. If I take on your case, the price is the price. So they get their plan and they get their tentative pricing. So then if they like that, they can book a consult and come in. So what happens is people book their consults, they come in. By this point, they know my personality. They know how I do things. They know my before and afters because they've seen all the stuff on social media. They know exactly the plan that I'm going to tell them. They know exactly the price. So you've removed all the barriers of entry. All the objections are gone. So by the time they come in and then they see our cool office that smells nice, they got the cold pressed juices and our front desk person is awesome. They're like, oh my God. And they come in. And as long as I'm not a weirdo in person, and I'm the same, then they got everything's gone. And then we book our surgeries at a 90% rate. Okay. Now, we only book at 90% because Catherine hooked us up. Let me tell you guys, Catherine hooked me up through her converting club course. This is not commercial or nothing. Twice in my field, in my thing. 8 years ago, I'm gonna tell you how great Catherine is, why I'm such a fan of hers. 8 years ago, when we first started doing cosmetic stuff, and I had that one girl that I told you that was amazing that started with me. I didn't know how to do cosmetic booking. She wasn't that good at it. We were booking maybe 30% convert. We were converting 30% of people to surgery. I put her in the converting club with Catherine for 6 months. We went from 30% to 90% conversions. It was awesome. And it's like, not only to pay for itself, killed it, revolutionized her practice. We would never gotten to this point without that. Okay. Flash forward 7-8 years. The employee that I had leaves. She had a baby, and it's all in good terms. But we had some stuff where my receptionist had to kick up to the converting position, the coordinator position, super quickly, and because that person was like a bad hire, and it just so happens. And what are you going to do? And then I was like, listen, it's time for you to jump in here. And she jumped in, and she was converting at 30%. And we went. Guess what? This is in the summer when you need every single case you can get. And we went from 90% to 30%. And I'm like, I'm basically as solo private practice, I'm like, oh. This is really hard. This is where you're like, I'm happy to have that line of credit. But here's the deal. It just so happens that Catherine called me around that time. I can't remember about what. We were just randomly talking. And she's like, and I was like, Catherine, I'm glad you called because I actually have this girl I got to put into your converting club thing. As you still have that? And she's like, yes. And the price had gone up since then. And I was like, okay, that's the inflation for you. That's fine. But guess what? Put her in that thing. Once again, this girl went from 30% to 90% converting. We converted 90% all our patients because I think everything counts. Yes, you have to be a good surgeon. Yes, the office will be good. Or the convert, everyone has their numbers, transparency, but the skills have got to be there. So the people come in and we convert now at a 90% through the very basic skills that Catherine taught. And she did it twice for me in my practice. And we did this about a year and a half ago over a year and a half ago. And my coordinator is killing it still based on these basic skills that Catherine taught that did it twice for me. So that's why I'm a huge fan of this whole thing. And so that's where we're at right now. And here's another thing I'll say about Catherine. Catherine has been doing this for so long. She knows what, listen, the excuses that people give for not doing surgery have not changed in 20, 30 years, man. It's always, I got to talk to my husband. Oh, I got to get my schedule. Oh, these things have not changed. Social media or not, TikTok or not, however you run your practice. These are the basics of human nature and buying. basically plastic surgery, and they haven't changed. And Catherine's got a nail. She didn't know I was going to tell you guys about this, but she's
Thank you
done it
so
for me
much. All right,
twice.
let's
She's done it
move
for me
on. But
twice.
the
Sorry.
point being, it takes everything. You have to look at your patient experience from A to Z and see where are you losing them and fix it. So you fixed all of it on your end. You found your patient, you found the niche, you found the procedures you like to do. You streamlined everything. You stopped doing the silly stuff. That's what we talked about. Stop doing all the silly stuff and go with the big cases that you always love the big cases. I said, just focus on the big cases, but then we have to sell them. We have to figure out how do you get that patient to a yes. It all goes together, and you are probably one of the surgeons who actually takes some of my advice, and that's the difference too. Because everyone can talk all day about things you should do, but if you don't execute, it doesn't count. Anyway, thank you so much for
Look,
that.
I'll tell you, Catherine, I may seem either arrogant or pretend like I know. I am so, like, I would say internally humble. I think I suck so hard that when it comes to taking advice, let me take all the advice I can from anyone because I know nothing. That's basically it, man. We're all just trying to figure it out. And you could be on top of the world, and the next day, COVID hits or something hits, and you're not. Every entrepreneur is going to get slapped in the face. And I remember hearing this from Layla Hormozi back in the day before I got slapped in the face, and then I got slapped in the face. And you're reeling. You think you're on top of the world, so no, you got to always keep learning. I just want to share what's worked for me, so that hopefully it'll help other folks out there. And I just want to keep it real. That's why I'm so trying to be transparent about it.
I just love your quality versus quantity process, because you really have streamlined your life, and you have I just love your process. But we have to wrap it up now. We're way over time.
Yeah.
Give me a crazy patient or staff story you care to share.
All right, I'll say it about a patient. And it took me a while to figure this out because, okay, so here's the deal. I always say, patients will die to get on your table. There's a patient about 3-4 years ago, and she was, I think, 52 years old. She was a young 52. She was coming for BBL tummy tuck combo. She was coming from Florida, and we always get medical clearance on everybody. And we get her medical clearance. She delays it and kind of drags her feet on it. We get the medical clearance. It comes. The EKG shows old anterior infarct. She said nothing about having an MI or a heart attack in the past. And I was like, certainly this must be a mistake. But these things are not mistakes on EKGs. So I talked to the patient, and I just tell her, I'm like, hey, look, obviously there's a mistake. Your surgery's up, coming up in a couple weeks. And she's like, oh yeah, that would never happen. Actually, I got admitted to the hospital for a few days. And when I had this, it was chest pain and blah, blah, blah. And they said it was definitely not a heart attack. That's what they said. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, if they said it was definitely not a heart attack, why don't you have your cardiologist that you see just write, this was definitely not a heart attack, or it wasn't a heart attack, it passed, and we're cool for surgery. And she's like, oh, okay. And then she goes, and then she comes back after a day or two and tells us, she's like, yeah, they're not going to say that. And I was like, yeah, no shit, they're not going to say that. You had a heart attack and you just tried to hide it from us. I didn't say that. That's what I was thinking in my head. But I was actually very nice. I was like, well, I understand why they wouldn't want to say that. And, but because you have this history. And I was like, so I tried to explain to her, I can't do I have to tell her, her surgery is coming up in a week. And she hid the fact that she had a heart attack from us. And she was dying to get on this table for kind of a big surgery. And I was like, I tried to tell her in clear words that I could kill you. You're going to die on this table. And she screamed at me so hard, and she was so angry that I would cancel her surgery. And I was like, this is so crazy that this person lied about having a heart attack. And I'm trying to tell them there's a chance they may die on this table. And they are mad at me for canceling things and keeping them from, and they still want to get the surgery. So that, I think, taught me a lot, that you're like, look, you can never be too safe. But also, some patients out there will do anything to get on that table, including killing themselves, So that was crazy. I mean, luckily you don't see that too often.
Yeah. It's so crazy. And last question, tell us something interesting we don't know about you.
Oh man. I'll do the music thing. Here's the thing. I did music production a lot, and I played a lot of raves, and I even I had a residency at the biggest club in Chicago. So this club that I residency in Chicago while I was in general surgery residency, it was a top 40 club. It was the ranked number 40 in the world. And I would play there Thursday and Saturday nights in the main room. And then still be doing surgery the next day on Friday or whatever. And it was awesome. And I eventually, the week before I went to New York for my fellowship, I played at Spring Awakening Festival at Soldier Field in Chicago, and even got my name on the T-shirt. And that was the big electronic festival. And even got my name on the T-shirt with guys like Skrillex and Calvin Harris and all these big guys at that time. And I still have that T-shirt. And then a year later, I went to a concert, and I was standing in line at the coat check, and the guy in front of me had a T-shirt, and my name was on it. And I saw that, I was like, this is crazy because I'm not a musician and I'm a plastic surgeon or whatever. And I'm like, to have my name on the t-shirt spontaneously, I see on someone wearing it in front of me, it was crazy. So that was crazy. I love music. I love that. I still, the last time I wrote was probably a year ago, but I kind of incessantly wrote from 14 years old up until I'm 44 now. So it's really hard to kind of put that aside, but it's really a priority thing where it's kind of like, right now I'm trying to just grow so much and take care of my patients and my practice and do all these things that we talked about that it doesn't leave a lot of time for other things when you try to prioritize. And it's kind of one of these things is like, look, I love Big Macs. I love Big Macs and I would eat Big Macs every day if I could, but I can't because I'm trying to stay fit and lose weight and all this stuff. And so I don't end up eating a Big Mac for like 2 years because every day you just decide you're like, yeah, I'd love to eat a Big Mac, but today's not the day. It's almost like alcoholics. They're like, one more day, right? So with music, even though it's a passion, I'm like, I'm just so driven to try to grow as much as I can with this plastic surgery and this whatever this business thing that we're doing, that I have to put those things aside. So yeah, I guess what they wouldn't know is that I was pretty hardcore in music and we did really good. It was a ton of fun. It was actually some of the funnest years of my life. It was awesome, but different chapter.
I know several surgeons actually who are in bands. They love music and they've put bands together. There's definitely a little trio down in LA.
Yeah. I saw Ashkan Gavami on your podcast was talking about it. I actually saw him play guitar at a thing, and he was great. He's really good. Yeah. A lot of these guys are like really good.
Yeah. So so you're still in growing mode, but there's no. I'm sure they're looking for another player. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we'll see. I got to dust off some skills again.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up now. Anybody, if they wanted to get a hold of you, I know your website is RAM Plastic Surgery. I'm sorry, what does RAM stand for? RAM?
Yeah, so my first name is Ramsen, and I wanted to do a play on that, but actually I just did it as, it was actually when I first started my practice, I was like reconstructive aesthetic maintenance plastic surgery. So there you go. But now we just call it RAM Plastic Surgery. It's kind of like how KFC for a long time was Kentucky Fried Chicken, but then when health kicks happened, then they went to branding themselves as just KFC. And so now we're just kind of RAM Plastic Surgery because we don't do reconstructive as much anymore.
But I love the name RAM. I never forget it. I forget your name sometimes because I love your name, Azizi.
Totally fine.
Yeah. But I always remember RAM Plastic Surgery. But your Instagram is Dr. Azizi Chicago. So it's DRAZIZI Chicago.
That's right.
And that's going to wrap it up for us, everybody. Sorry we ran a little long. If you would please review and subscribe and share Beauty in the Biz with your colleagues and your staff and Google and all those people. And then if you've got any questions or feedback for me, please leave them on my website at CatherineMaley.com, or you can certainly DM me on Instagram at CatherineMaleyMBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon. The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want. But you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.